I'm Pat Lyden from the University of Southern California, and it's my honor to be present with the principal investigators of the MOST trial, which we just heard the exciting results presented at our main session this morning. I'll let the investigators introduce themselves and then grill them about these very interesting data.
I'm Andrew Barreto, a stroke neurologist from UT Houston.
And I'm Opeolu Adeoye. I'm an emergency physician at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis.
So guys, this was a really tough trial. What got you interested in doing this trial, and why did you work together on it?
Well, it seemed like a natural fit that rather than doing two different trials, both independently testing each drug, eptifibatide versus argatroban, that we come together and we make a trial that would make use of the same placebo arm, that would make use of a smaller N overall, and it just kind of flowed naturally from the phase 2 trials.
Yeah, and I agree with what Andrew's just said. It was a great collaborative effort altogether from two teams that had been working somewhat independently, and so to be able to collaborate and get both questions answered in one trial was really a fun time, honestly.
Now, the trial had some very unique and important innovations, one of which was the response adaptive range. But because of that, you ended up with fewer patients in the argatroban group than maybe you needed. Tell us about that design, why you chose it, and was it the right way to go in retrospect?
Yeah, the thought was that we may start to see a signal early on. The trial was originally designed for 1,200 patients, and so we wanted to use techniques that could potentially identify an arm that was performing better, perhaps, or in this case, not performing as well, and then use that to tailor where the patients were randomized to. I think it's also important for patients to know that they're going to be in a trial where they'll have a higher chance of receiving a drug that looks like it's working.
And the only thing I would add to that is we were able to answer this question of argatroban in a fairly efficient fashion, which is part of the advantage of the response adapter randomization. And I think we're validated by results of other trials, larger trials that suggest that what our finding is in fact valid.
Now, another innovation that you instituted over the objections of some actually was the utility-weighted Rankin, controversial approach to the Rankin score. Tell us about what it is and then why you chose it.
So the primary outcome was the MRS. So people that assessed the patients, they performed the MRS evaluation, and then those were translated into utility scores. The advantage of the utility score is that it assigns patients' own preferences for the weights of that health state. So for instance, patients have looked at their outcome and then they've decided using a different scale how to assign the weight of what an MRS of 2 is versus a 3. And so it's a very patient-centered approach, which is where a lot of healthcare is moving now.
And again, the key part of Andrew's comments is the patient-centeredness in the utilities. And the Rankin is, in fact, the primary outcome. It's just the way in which we're analyzing the Rankin is the way that I think about it. In as much as a 0 to 1 or a 0 to 2, I think are different approaches to analyzing the Rankin.
The criticism from the regulatory bodies is that the weights are chosen based on some research that hasn't been replicated. And I wonder how you feel about using the weights. Tell us which weights you used and how you feel about using them.
So we used, I forget the primary source, authors, and it was actually a combination of patients and healthcare providers that estimated the utilities. And yes, it's correct that they have not subsequently been independently validated, but I think the outcome itself has been used in multiple clinical trials since those weights were introduced. And so in the context of whether or not the utility-weighted analytic approach is a useful measure in assessing stroke patient outcomes. I think that part of it has been repeatedly validated, even though the individual weights have not been.
Well, what's next for argatroban and for eptifibatide?
Well, we're kind of in a holding pattern to see if we could look at the data a little bit more closely and see if we can find any evidence of any subgroup that may have been helped by these medications. So far, we're not seeing a lot of positivity there, but we're open for the next treatment. I'm not sure if argatroban or eptifibatide has its place going forward, considering our results, though.
It really does seem like we have definitively answered that these two medications are not the adjunctive treatments that we would hope for in acute ischemic stroke. And so I think we will keep analyzing and taking a close look and make sure we didn't miss anything. But that aside, the goal is probably to identify alternative medications and molecules that I don't think the notion of addressing microthrombosis or is dead. I think the issue is these are not the drugs that are going to help us get there.
Very good. Well, thank you for leading this very challenging trial. For the audience, not only did these gentlemen face the usual troubles with a large phase 3 trial, but did so during a global pandemic, and you're to be congratulated for leading the trial and keeping it going and seeing it through to the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.